Purpose is not a mystery. It's not something that is hidden from you. The reason you exist is the same reason I exist. As long as you're a human being like me, as long as I'm a human being like you, we all have the same purpose. Defined dominion as enforcing heaven's agenda in an earthly system. There is a responsibility that you are supposed to carry out that helps you fulfill your God-given purpose. Me, incoming CEO, I cannot work for anybody. I am my own boss. Before you become who God has called you to be, there would always be a preparation. For you to be able to live out your purpose, you need to have a proper understanding of who God has designed you to be. So how then do I know my calling? And here are a few things that can help you to be able to know your calling. Hello everyone, and welcome back, I guess. So I don't know if I'm to tell you welcome back or if you are to tell me welcome back. But either ways, I'm excited to be in your faces once again. And I'm hoping and praying that I'll be more frequent than I used to be. I'm really praying about that or working towards it. So for those of you that don't know, my name is Patience and I am that global woman. There's something that has really been on my mind for pretty much over a year now to talk about, but for some reason I've not been able to put out a video on it. But yeah, what I really wanted to talk about was concerning fulfilling God's purpose for our lives. I got to discover that there are certain people that really just exist on this earth without any sense or idea of why they exist. And then there are certain people that probably got to maybe know why they exist, but for some reason they have not been able to do anything about it. They struggle to find their bearing. I think that's the way I'm going to put it. Or really just live out God's plan for their lives. So they struggle to live out God's plan for their lives. And so I really just wanted to talk about it. And I have a slide, so I'm going to be using a slide on this particular video. Here it says, what is my life purpose? You know, there are certain people that ask this question, and when they ask the question, they make it seem as though purpose is something that is hidden or something that you have to find, like a mystery that has to be uncovered or something. Purpose is not a mystery. It's not something that is hidden from you. But one thing I've noticed is that why people get confused with this whole purpose thing is because they tend to mix up purpose with calling and calling with assignments. They are kind of similar, or I'm going to put it that they are related but not exactly the same. So I believe that is where most of the confusion comes in, when you don't know which one is your purpose and which one is your calling and which one is your assignment. And this is what I really want to just address in this video, because you really will need to understand what's different, what is your purpose, what is your calling, and what are your assignments. When you have an understanding of that, and I think that is when you can now know how to live out God's plan for your life. So we get to ask the question, what is purpose? And it says purpose is God's original design or plan for you. Your purpose answers to the question, why were you created? You were actually designed and created with an intention in mind. So take for instance, someone decides to manufacture a car. There's pretty much a thought process that this person had before, bringing up the design and what the car would look like and the functionalities and everything. And what I really want to highlight is that thought process. So it means that whatever the car eventually becomes is because of what the person manufacturing it thought about. When God was creating us, he had an intention. Here in Genesis 1:26-27, which I'm going to read, it says, "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them." So when someone asks you what is your purpose, or when you even ask yourself what is your purpose, this right here is your purpose. God created you in his image. I'm going to highlight the part that said, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion. So that was pretty much the intention God had before making man. So the reason you exist is because God intended for you to be made in his image, or to reflect his image, and to have dominion. So that exactly is your purpose. As long as you're a human being, as long as you were created by God, then that is exactly your purpose. So you don't have to get confused about it. It's not something that is hidden. It's not something that you have to go and discover. You have to go and climb a mountain to know about. It's really written here. It's why were you created? So you were created to reflect the image of God. You were created to stand in rulership over the earth on behalf of God. And you were created to enforce the agenda of God's kingdom upon the earth. I was listening to one of my mentors, and she defined dominion as enforcing heaven's agenda in an earthly system. Let's take, for instance, a landlord giving his property, or putting his property in the care of a caretaker. When God created the whole earth, he put it under the care of man. So that is pretty much the idea you should have in your head, that we exist to stand or rule on behalf of God. So you would see that in the instance of a landlord and a caretaker, you see that whatever the caretaker does is always in the interest of the landlord. And if peradventure a tenant is trying to do something that he knows the landlord will not like, he is there to make sure that things like that do not happen. So that's the same picture we should have when we're talking about existing in dominion. It means that God has placed us in charge, that we should enforce his kingdom agenda here on the earth. So that is why you were created. So here are some things that you need to note on purpose. Purpose is universal and lifelong. When you say purpose is universal and lifelong, it means that your purpose is also my purpose. The reason you exist is the same reason I exist. As long as you're a human being like me, as long as I'm a human being like you, we all have the same purpose. So purpose is universal. It's not particularly unique, because that was what the intention God had when he was creating man, that we would be in his image and that we would live in dominion. So purpose is universal and it lasts through our lifetime. It doesn't change. The same reason you exist today is the same reason you would exist in your lifetime, all through your lifetime. Also, we are to bear the image of God and steward the earth. So basically, we exist in this world for stewardship. Just see it as God placing the earth in our care, placing his creation in our care. And also, God established a kingdom and placed us to represent him and rule on his behalf. So what then is calling? If we now understand purpose, what then is calling? Calling is a particular responsibility through which you fulfill God's purpose. Your calling answers to the question, who am I called to be? There is a responsibility that you are supposed to carry out that helps you fulfill your God-given purpose. Genesis 1 verse 28. I would start from 27. It says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Immediately after God had created man, the next thing he did was to pronounce a blessing upon man. And that was when he said to man, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue, and have dominion. That the moment God made you, this is what he expects you to do. That is your responsibility. So I would like to see that as a primary calling. So your calling is a responsibility that has been given to you to fulfill your purpose. But then you will now hear people say things like, oh, I have been called to be a pastor, or I have a calling for music ministry, or whatever it is. that then can be termed as a secondary calling. So it means that for you to be fruitful, for you to multiply, replenish the earth, there is a responsibility that you have to take. There is something that you have to do for you to be able to express that calling that God has placed upon you. So there are some things that you need to note on calling. Your calling finds expression through different vocations or responsibilities, but share the same foundational basis. And your calling remains consistent through your lifetime, though it may expand. So it means that whatever you have been called to do is pretty much the same thing that you would keep doing, although it may expand, but it doesn't really change. It is always consistent. Here are some examples that shows different expressions of our callings to fulfill God's purpose. A teacher reflects God's wisdom. A business owner reflects God's stewardship. A musician reflects God's creativity. A mother reflects God's nurture and care. A pastor reflects God's shepherding heart. The purpose remains the same. The calling differs. So you can see that whether or not you choose to be a teacher, or whether or not you have been called to be a teacher, you have been called to be a business owner, a pastor, a music minister, whatever it is that you have been called to do, one way or the other, it reflects the image of God. Here are also some scriptural examples. Moses reflected God's authority through leadership. David reflected God's rule through kingship. Joseph reflected God's wisdom through administration. So Moses was called to be a leader. He was able to reflect God's authority through his calling. I know someone might be asking, so how then do I know my calling? And I think this is one of the frustrations that many people have, because when some people have their lives going on or figured out, and you are just here really wondering, like, what do I really have to do? How do I really have to navigate this life? I can 100% relate to that. And so I would really understand if you get asked the question, how do you know your calling? And here are a few things that can help you to be able to know your calling. Pay close attention to the passion of your heart, your gifts and needs you feel drawn to meet. I remember a few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with someone that I was not so close to, but for some reason I thought to engage the person in a conversation because I figured that this person was really good at what he does. And so I was just trying to encourage the person to maybe get a proper commercial space. Needs more people to get to know him. And so in the course of that conversation, he asked a question that struck me, and he was like, so aside God using me to encourage people, what else do I do? And I said to him, like, now that you've said it, I think this is a calling, because I actually realized that it's something that I really just love to do. And sometimes it feels like I'm putting myself in people's business, but it's really more of the concern I have to just see people thrive in the things that they do. And so I was just saying, like, oh, this is really a calling. It's not like that was the first time I'm noticing, but to me it was kind of a confirmation for me to really see that there's really something there. And so maybe you're like me, people have told you, oh, this thing, you're really good at it, maybe you should consider it, or something you just cannot look away from. Other people look away from it, but you just know that you really cannot turn a blind eye to this. You feel like you have a solution to it, whatever it could be. Maybe it's a gift that you have that you do not even struggle to showcase. I think it's something you should pay close attention to, and that way it could just be a confirmation that it's your calling. Another thing is to pay attention to opportunities God opens for you and take responsibilities. One approach I have to life is that every phase of my life, I see it as preparation for the next phase of my life. So there are certain opportunities that God can just open up to you, and you are wondering, like, why am I here? The reason you are there is because there is something God wants to see you. And so it's better you take responsibility, serve in that capacity, be useful, be relevant. Sometimes clarity even comes when we accept such responsibilities. You now realize that, oh, maybe this is really my thing. Maybe this is where I should be. And always be sensitive to opportunities that God opens for you, and make sure you take responsibilities. Another thing, which is really the most important, is to seek confirmation directly from God. I remember one of the stories my pastor would always say, when he was talking about how he really wanted to know if he was called into ministry or if he should just, face his medical profession and all of that. Like, he was really thriving in both areas. But because he was particular about knowing what God's plan was for his life, he decided to go on a 3-day fast, I think. And it was in the course of that retreat, personal retreat that he had, that he got to really know what was God's plan for his life. So I would encourage you to really consciously seek God's confirmation. Through prayer, God can speak to you, or through the study of the word, through an inner witness, whatever it is. Just make sure that you consciously and deliberately seek God's confirmation, and he will reveal it to you, because he has said in his word that if you seek him with all of your heart, you would find him. So I can assure you that if you are intentional about knowing your calling, it's definitely going to reveal it to you. So there's this phrase I put up here, which is, if it is your calling, it will keep calling. I had to put this up because I realized that no matter how you try to run away, if it is your calling, it will keep calling. The only thing you can do is be in denial. I remember one time when God was starting to reveal to me my calling, and in my mind I'm like, it cannot be me. I'm like, this has to be a joke. I was like, no way, because I'm like, what? This is not what the picture I had. This is not what I imagined, and all of that. I was in so much denial. I scoffed it off. I tried to run away and everything, but I just realized that you really cannot run away. So the earlier you answer that call, the better for you, because the truth is, you are just going to find peace with it. It doesn't matter what else you do to keep yourself busy, to give yourself the idea that you're really doing something. If it is really not your calling, you wouldn't have that true satisfaction until you do what you have been called to do. That is when you find peace. That is when you find fulfillment. So what is an assignment? We've talked about purpose, we've talked about calling, and now what is assignment? Assignments are specific tasks that ought to be carried out in a given time, which is often seasonal. Your assignment answers to the question, what am I to do now? So assignments are more like tasks that you carry out, which are not really for a long period of time. It's just like a seasonal thing that you have to do that relates to your calling. So here is something to note on assignments. Assignments are the specific responsibilities God gives us per time in different seasons of our lives to fulfill our calling. For example, Moses' calling was leadership, but his assignment changed. At some point, Moses had to confront Pharaoh. At some point, Moses had to lead Israel out of Egypt. At some point, Moses had to receive the law. At some point, Moses had to guide Israel through the wilderness. Here is a warning. Be careful not to neglect or look down on an assignment because it doesn't look like your calling. Let's say, for instance, God calls you to be a business owner. And for that particular period of time, maybe your business is not really, maybe it's just starting off, or you're still in the ideation phase, and God is like, okay, I want you to go and work for this person for so period of time, or he doesn't even tell you how long you should work there. He just tells you, okay, go and work, or go and apply for a job in this place. And you're like, oh, me, incoming CEO, what should I be doing here? How can I possibly do that? And you're just like, it cannot be me. I cannot work for anybody. I am my own boss. Hello. But I strongly believe that before you become who God has called you to be, there would always be a preparation. It could be that assignment God is giving you is there's every possibility that assignment God is giving you is in preparation for what he has called you to be. So see it as a responsibility to take on, so you can actually just function excellently. Because if you don't work for someone, how then do you build the experience to work for yourself? There are certain things that you definitely need to learn, and you won't just learn it out of the blues. You need that experience. For everybody's calling, the assignment could be different, but what I really just want to point out is not to look down on an assignment because it doesn't look anything like your calling. The second thing for you to be warned about is to be careful not to confuse an assignment as your calling. Remember, I said that an assignment is seasonal, it's just for a period of time. So don't sit on an assignment and take it as a calling. It could just be for a particular period of time, and after then, there is really no point doing that task anymore. So be sensitive to know what is a calling and what is an assignment. How do you differentiate your calling from your assignment? You try to find out if the responsibility you are taking on is lifelong or seasonal. For example, God may instruct someone whose primary calling is leadership or administration to teach a course for 6 months. The teaching itself is not their core calling, but a temporary assignment. So if you've been called to be a leader, God can give you an instruction to take on a course. So because you are teaching that course doesn't necessarily mean that you've been called to be a teacher. So you need to know, this instruction God is giving me, is it seasonal or is it lifelong? That way, when you have an idea of the duration, you get to know, okay, this is my calling, or this is an assignment that God wants me to carry out. So always pay attention to the duration of the task that God gives you. That way you get to know what is your calling and what is an assignment. And here is a helpful test. You ask yourself, is this a role I am consistently graced and called to fulfill, or is it a specific task I have been given for a particular season? When it is consistent, it is a calling, and when it is specific, it is an assignment. So you get to find out whichever one it is. So here's a summary of everything we have talked about today. For your purpose, it is universal and lifelong. For calling, it is lifelong but specific. And for assignment, it is specific but seasonal. For purpose, it is to know why you were created. For your calling, it is to know who you are called to be. And for your assignment, it is to know what you are to do now. So here is a conclusion. Many people spend their lives looking for purpose when God has already revealed it. The real question is not, do I have a purpose? The question is, what calling has God given me to express that purpose? And what assignment is He asking me to carry out right now? So rather than asking yourself, oh, what is my purpose? Your purpose, as we talked in this video, is just to reflect the image of God and to rule on the behalf of God. What you need to now ask, or what you get to find out, is what God has called you to do and what you need to do in the moment. So your purpose is not something that should be discovered. Your purpose is something that should be understood. For you to be able to live out your purpose, you need to have a proper understanding of who God has designed you to be, and then you get to know what has God called you to do and what are you supposed to do in the moment. And I believe that this video is really just going to give someone the clarity that they needed to know what God really wants to do in their lives, and that way you get to live out God's plan for your life. And so I pray that God is going to give you the clarity that you've been seeking for, and you get to live out God's plan for your life in Jesus' name. In my next video, I'm just going to be talking about some of the hindrances that stand in the way of the fulfillment of God's plan for our life. So I would encourage you to turn on your notification so you get notified when I drop the next video, and I'll see you there. Thank you very much, and thanks for watching.